Grace is simply, in its simplest term, divine enablement. It's simply the ability of God working in a man. That is grace. The ability of God working in a man. As simple as A, B, C, D. Every other definition you will hear from other places is just an expansion. The simplest definition of grace is what? God's ability at work in a man. Now, one will ask, how can one access grace, or how does the economy of grace work? I'm going to be giving us several examples of how it works with different dimensions of our life where we need grace. For instance, one of the things, let me tell you the things that fight men from receiving grace. One of the things that deprive men from being participant of grace is lack of faith and disobedience. What? Lack of faith in God and absolute disobedience. Lack of faith and disobedience, because this is how grace works. Now, if you don't have a limitation in your life, you don't need grace. That's number one you should know about grace. If you don't have what? A limitation in your life. There is no area of your life where there is a limitation, where there is you lack sufficiency, where there is insufficiency, because grace is God's sufficiency upon our life. Grace is what gives us sufficiency, efficiency. Are you getting me? So all of this is whenever you see that you are insufficient, that then in that area where you have noticed insufficiency is where that is where you need what? Grace. Let me say someone is struggling with this prayer life. You don't need grace if you can pray, if you can do your prayers in the flesh. Are you getting me? You don't need grace. Meanwhile, anything done without grace is sin. Anything done without faith is sin. Are you getting me? Let me show you from the scriptures that everything we do must be done by faith. I'll give us two scriptures. Are we together? Two what? Two scriptures. Let's see Romans 8:8. What the Bible says there, Romans 8 and verse 8. The Bible says, so then they that are in the flesh cannot please God. So if you pray your prayers and it is in the flesh, you cannot, that prayer, it has no way it can please God. And if something does not please God, it means it displeases Him. And anything that displeases God is what? Is sin. Anything that displeases God is what? Is sin. Anything that displeases God is sin. This is Hebrews 11 verse 6. But without faith, it is what? Impossible to please God. Are you seeing that? So, the economy of grace runs on faith. Now, how does grace work? If you are here and you struggle with your prayer life, it is not a bad thing. It's a sign that you need grace. Are you getting me? If you are here and you struggle with some level of sin, it's not automatically a bad thing. It's a sign that you are lacking grace. You need grace. Now, how does grace come into your life? Number one, this is how grace works. Let me use the case of prayerlessness as a case study. Someone who is prayerless, for instance, now, who desires the grace of God to come upon his life to sustain him or her in prayer. Number one, you must know that diligence is required in obeying God's instruction. Having known that you are prayerless and that only God's grace can help you become prayerful, what then do? You remain in prayer asking the Lord to grant you grace to pray. Are you getting me? Your art of continuing in that prayer, even in your prayerlessness, even if it is 2-3 hours you could pray, even if it is 30 minutes you could pray, but that 30 minutes that you could pray without grace, the only prayer you were praying was that, Lord, grant me grace. How does grace work? the Lord will now come and give you an instruction that probably fast from this time to this time. And then maybe 6 hours before the time of your prayers, don't eat. Or 4 hours before the time of your prayers, stay away from food. And then you go on most of these instructions. Are you getting me now? For some of you who may not receive instructions like this, the easiest way to access grace is what? Is to remain asking the Lord for grace. So you are struggling with prayer for the first 30 minutes. It is a struggle. The sign that you need grace is that you will remain. Are you getting me? Only those who continue can find grace. Listen to that. Mark the word I use. Continue. Continue in humility, demand grace. Now, when God's grace comes upon you, it brings ease. Are you getting me? Once you notice that you now pray with ease, you no longer pray with stress, no longer pray by forcing yourself. No, it is now a delight. It means grace that have come upon you. Meanwhile, grace cannot come upon you if you had no limitation, because grace comes to remove the limitation you had, to make you pray as though it's a natural thing. Grace helps you do natural things supernaturally and supernatural things naturally. So it is supernatural to prophesy, to know things about people, to know what's going to be happening, and to know the will of God. But you operate in that dimension natural, as though it's your natural life. I get it. That is grace making supernatural things natural. And then to fast is not natural. Okay, to fast as it were is not easy in the flesh. Are you getting me? So the supernatural, which is seeing vision, is natural to you. You see, it's very easy for you. And then the natural one, which is supposed to be driven by your flesh, which is prayer or fasting, you are doing it by supernatural energy. So you can go on praying for 4 hours, 5 hours. That is not natural in the flesh. Now you are doing a supernatural thing naturally, because what? Grace has come upon you. Now, when this grace come upon you, haven't remained in prayers, asking God for this grace, when it comes upon you, you notice ease. So, if there was no limitation, then there is no need for grace. Are you getting me? And only those who ask for grace can receive one. So the prayer you pray before grace come upon you to pray other prayers is the prayer for grace, that the Lord will increase you. So while you are praying in tongues on your knees, feeling tired, all you are asking for is grace. It's for the Spirit. It's for His grace. It's for His Spirit. As you continue for the next 30, 40 minutes, remaining struggling, remaining on your knees, remaining. According to maybe I've interviewed a few persons, and you will notice that while you are in that prayer, somewhere around 40 minutes for some people, 30 minutes, 1 hour, you will notice that the atmosphere changes and it becomes easy. You look as though an energy is powering you to pray. What happened? Grace has been made available to you in that time. Or for instance, now let me use this other case. For someone who is you find it difficult to give. For instance, there are people like that, they find it very difficult to give. Now it is because you are still in the flesh. Are you getting me? If you want to receive the grace that comes upon, the grace for still, there are people that it is not a lifestyle. They don't struggle with it anymore. Do you know why? The grace to do it have come upon them. Anything you do in the kingdom will struggle. It means there is no grace. Anything you do in this kingdom and you do it with struggle, it means there is no grace. There is no grace. So if you want to give and you struggle to give, you are doing that thing in the flesh. There is no grace. There is no grace. Now the only way you can receive grace is to continue in giving. Are you seeing that now? You don't stop. When you continue, it's okay when you struggle at first, but when you continue, God seeing your willingness to do it, but seeing that you don't have the capacity, and even though you don't have the capacity, you are forcing yourself, you will then put in grace. The grace is like He will put in the willingness in your heart to do it. An energy that crystallizes willingness in your heart. Just the same way, if you are not you may not be the sinful type, but there's a kind of video that you will watch for the next 10 minutes and sin will take over you. There's some kind of things you view for or hear for the next 10 minutes. The energy of sin will come around you. That's also the same way that when God wants to help you with grace, He will bring the energy of willingness upon you. So you don't know why, but you don't feel like I can give this thing easily now. What have come upon you? Grace. How do you receive that grace? To continue remaining in what you are doing, even though you are struggling, believing and waiting on God for grace. So those who don't continue cannot access grace. Are you getting me? You have to start when he sees your willingness. Spirit don't place things on people anyhow. They place things on people, on those who they know they can draw advantage from. Are you getting me? Let me use another instance again. For instance, so that you need the grace for revelation. Are you getting me? The grace for revelation. The grace for revelation. Maybe revelation from God's word. What do? You start studying. After you pray, you take a Bible and study. You may not get revelation in the first one day, second day, the third day, the fourth day. It could just be like you are reading a storybook. But as you continue studying that Bible, praying that the Lord give you revelation from the word, maybe on the fourth day, on the fifth day, you will notice that an understanding will be infused into your spirit. Where the understanding comes from, you don't know, but you will just start understanding scriptures. Strange explanation from scripture will be coming to you. You'll be wondering, how have I not seen this before? What has happened to you? Grace is now working upon you. This is how grace works. If there is no limitation, then grace is not needed. So once you notice a limitation in your life, continue what you are doing, believing Him for grace. Grace will surely come. If you genuinely trust Him for what? For grace. Are we together? So the things you could not do before, you can now do it now. Because why? Grace is now powering you. So what make God able to do that thing is what has been transferred to you. What make God a God of love and a God that gives, so that He gave and gave His only begotten Son. That same thing that made Him give His Son is now upon you, so you cannot give easily. That same thing that make Him a God in His nature. That thing that make Him a judge, a king, has rested upon you, so you can now operate in priesthood, like prayer, like fasting, as though it is the Lord in you operating like that. Because why? What powers in the thing that is. So for instance, now if you squeeze orange, what comes out is what? Is water, orange water. What grace is the squeezing of God. God take the squeezing that came out from Him and place on you. So you are doing things by God's energy. So simple. When grace comes upon you, you can fast for 2 days straight and not even know that you've not eaten. Because why? Grace is upon you. Grace makes things easy, but at first you will struggle, because God needs to see the area of your insufficiency, so that when His grace comes, you will know the difference. Are we together?